Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is Poetry of Predicament, and that's a YouTube channel. And so the folks who aren't able to make it at this time of day on a Saturday will be watching the recording. Um, but I've got a lot of ground to cover because there's actually quite a bit of new stuff going on in what we're doing. Just got to have a little bit of conversation with both Steve and Ellen here about what brings them here, how did they find a link to join up to be able to get the updates for this kind of session, this kind of gathering. And we it's just it has been an ongoing challenge to make it a really easy process for people to come on in, find their way into, for instance, the community space, find out what sort of online courses we have, or events, or special focus groups. And there's still quite a bit of challenge to it. So if you folks who are watching the recording are having any sort of difficulty at any point in the process, any approach to any of the things we're going to talk about, I will also put my own contact information there in the show notes as well, in the recording on the podcast. So to everybody, to Ellen and Steve, and to the folks watching the recording, welcome. I'm just going to take a deep breath because I notice when I get excited about being here, and I start to breathe in a shallow way, and it has me be less and less present. I notice that the peripheral vision starts to come in a little bit, and I find it less easy to connect with my thoughts, with my sensations in my body, and also to be present to you. So I'm just doing that. I'm slowing down my breath a little bit, a little basic self-regulation here. And I would invite you to do whatever your version is to do the same. Um, that might be a really good place to start, assuming that there'll be some number of people here who really just don't know much about this body of work. I'd like to just introduce you to myself and how all this stuff got started, and a little bit about how we really intend to be of service to both the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. We have some international presence here most of the time. And basically how this got started was, for me, it actually started back when I was a teenager, which is a long time ago. I'm getting up in age now. And, back in the 70s, I watched a guy named Jacques Cousteau on Sunday nights. He's a French guy who just did an extraordinary job of bringing us, the viewers on television, into the ocean. And he and his diver team, they actually invented a number of pieces of equipment that have now been the industry standard for decades in scuba diving and also in underwater photography. But enough about the technicality of Jacques Cousteau's work. He was also just an incredible conservationist and a spokesperson for our environmental, atmospheric habitat. And he was the first adult that I felt like I got a straight, clear message about two things. One was the immense, ineffable beauty of the ocean. And the other was, at the end of each of his Sunday night specials, he would tell us a little bit about the damage that was being done nearby where he had filmed the beauty. And that damage, of course, was being done by human beings. And that was that was my first opportunity to realize that there was no other adult. There was no adult around me, and there were no kids around me that really hooked into that message. I did, and I found myself in tears literally every time. And I went on a what has become a lifelong quest to find kindred spirits, to find some kind of camaraderie, to find out why are we doing this? Why are we doing this to ourselves? And that's a long story that has a tremendous amount, I think, that could be interesting to hear. This is not the place for it. So, catch me in another of our support groups where we have that kind of time to share. I'd like to just jump way ahead to realizing that this was going to happen back there in my teen years. This being human-caused collapse of both Earth and human systems. And I knew that that was going to happen, and I knew that I was seeing literally nothing happening at scale that was going to turn that trend around. And I also wasn't sure when it would happen at scale. I just knew it would. So the very few little threads that I found along my adult and professional and work life, those all pointed toward. I kept hearing the phrase 2100. By 2100, this will happen with when climate change was starting to be talked about in the 70s and 80s, or other aspects of collapse. So I kept doing my little career track. I knew that I was adding to all the greenhouse gases and all the detriment that our culture puts out there. And it was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that I really got my cage rattled. I got reminded, awakened to the fact that this was not going to be 2100, that in fact it was going to be happening much, much sooner. In fact, it was going to happen. There were going to be very large examples of collapse of Earth and human systems before 2050 was what the particular message and content that I was hearing. And I had to vet that material because it was just a bit mind-blowing, because it was quite a bit before 2050. And well, I just had to vet the material. I did that, and out of doing that, I saw that not only is it happening before 2050, but it's intensifying and accelerating. So I started to write a book about that process of what it is to get information at that scale, and to vet it, and to somehow integrate it into a life, into how do I live a life into that future. So the book that I wrote is The Impossible Conversation, and that was put out in 2017. And while I was writing the book, I realized that I had been in the training and coaching business for most of my adult life. And I realized that I wanted to bring my gifts to life, to the web of life. It was really that kind of scale of transformative moment. I let the professional career track go, and have turned all of my attention to being of service to life in some way. And I'm just going to tell one on myself here. I actually, humanity, and for sure the human systems we call normal, are not high on that list of how to be of service to life. I don't really have any investment in that we continue this self-terminating human operating system. So I'm just letting you know that that's my orientation. It doesn't have to be yours or anybody else's in this work. I want to be just as transparent as I can be in what I'm offering in this work. So we've got the woke moment, if you will, write the book, starting to put together a website and starting to find out what are other trainers, other organizations offering to the community of people who at that point could be called just folks who have a sensitivity to things are not right. Depending on what their attention is on, what's consistent in the message is things are not going okay. What soon happened was I started to contact others who were at the very least connected with this growing conversation about climate change. And that is part of the accelerating and intensifying material that I had heard about just a couple of years before. And so that was one of the threads that I started to follow to see what kind of numbers, what kind of who is where doing what. Are there activist groups? Are there people who are concerned in neighborhoods and regions around the world or around the USA? And I also started to look for, again, what kind of resources, what kind of courses, what kind of coaching or mental health support is available to these groups. So that's what got me to this point of having the website, starting to build out courses to get people informed of what's actually going on. I'm wondering if we could just take a couple of minutes for each of you to speak about whatever you'd like to share about when you cracked open to realizing in your way that something's not right and it really wanted more of your attention. It became something of a calling for you to learn more. Perhaps have you come to then participate in some way? So I'm wondering if either of you would like to just share a bit about what got you into this space, into this community, if you will.
Sure. Thanks, Dean. I'll speak to that. Um, well, I grew up on a farm and I ended up becoming a farmer as my means of paying the bills. And so I don't know that it was any one thing or that there was a moment that I could speak to, but I rather literally from the time I was a young kid playing in the woods um, and getting my base of knowledge from what existed then in the 50s and then seeing it change and kind of in my mind questioning it. Um, and especially I can remember being in my dad's peach orchard doing chores there and not seeing the birds. And it wasn't until, I don't know, a decade or two later when I read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring that that kind of clicked for me.
Mhm.
I I don't know. I mean, I think honestly, if I could point to a moment where the light bulb went on for me, it was 10 years or so back when I was staffing a personal growth seminar, and I had a moment in that when the question came to me, what's the point? What's the point of this personal growth if everything else is going to fall apart?
Yeah.
And of course, there's good point to it. There's good purpose to it for certainly for the people that are there and so on. But at that moment, it hit me that way, and um, it was the end of that day. I actually gathered the rest of the staff together when the students were out of the room and tried to explain to them what was going on for me. And I did a horrible job of it. I couldn't articulate what
Mhm.
I was feeling, what I was experiencing. But a couple of years later, when it started to gel for me, I actually reached out to that same group and I shared with them what was going on. And I don't know if it, I don't know if it still made sense to them or not, but So, yeah, I mean, and then the Drew Dellinger video, that 3 or 3.5 minute video when he talks about waking up at 3:42 in the morning or whatever time it is, and his great granddaughter is asking him, "What did you do?" That one really hit me over the head too, and it was a reinforcement of the fact that there's something I can do. I don't know what
Yes.
it is, but there's something I can do.
Yeah.
And so it was an accumulation of things, but those are clearly two moments that stood out for me that
Yeah.
nudged me along this path.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to ask you to speak, follow that thread a little further in a little while, because I'll be talking a little bit about the various offerings of living resilience. And one of the things that I'm involved with, in addition to that, is your course that you then created out of that thread you just shared with us. So, in a few minutes, if we could get you to describe a bit about that course, which is just blossoming, I'd be thrilled. So, yeah,
Sure.
thank you. Ellen, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to share about what woke you up, what kind of sparked you to be engaged in a way with environmental concerns or human systems concerns or whatever is most important to you.
Yeah, I was raised by a mother in the 50s who was an eco-feminist before anybody knew that word. And I can remember walking down the sidewalk and she would see a long line of ants and we'd have to stop and look at them and watch them. And she'd say, "Look, isn't that amazing?" And she used to find birds who had been wounded in some way, and she'd bring them in the house and she'd try to save them, and they always died, which was very sad. But so I was raised with that, just with mother's milk, that I've always been closer to nature and non-human animals than I am to humans. I've never really fit in too well with humans. So as far as collapse, so I was never an environmentalist because I remember the first Earth Day, I think it was 1970, was it? And people were saying, well, you got to recycle. You got to recycle to save the Earth. And that didn't make sense to me even then. Even I had never heard the word collapse. That didn't make sense to me. But so I've always been a political activist until recently. I'm no longer, but I still have beliefs, but I've always been a left-winger. So around sometime in the early 2010s, I heard Guy McPherson on the radio. So, he's a very controversial figure, but I heard him speak, and he was speaking about like the end of humans, if I recall. And I just thought he was a nut. And so I just went on about my business. But from him, I discovered the Facebook group, Near Term Human Extinction, which I've been on since I think 2014. And so I've learned a lot, and I make up my own mind. I don't believe anything because somebody says it, but I have come to believe that we probably will go extinct, or collapse is happening. And I really do not get into trying to determine when this will happen because we do not know. I mean, nobody thought, like 10 years ago, the best scientists in the world could not and did not predict we would be where we are today. It has all happened much faster. So I'm not in the business of predictions. And I don't even really follow the science that much because to me, what's the point? I mean, I'm glad people do, but I don't. But I am more aligned with Joanna Macy. I did some workshops with people who trained with her and saw her video, and I really, really just love her, love the attitude that she can look directly face on and name all the terrible things that are going on. And then she proceeds to say, she said this in one video I saw, she said, if I could choose to be on earth at any time, I would choose to be here right now with all you people.
Mhm.
And you know, it just gave me a different perspective, because I often feel like, God, this is a terrible time to be alive. You know, why am I alive now with all of this knowledge? So I really like her a lot. I do different things online with the work that reconnects. What else do I do? Deep adaptation, which you probably both know of. Steve, have you heard of it? Yeah, okay. So it's not 100% my cup of tea, but I do, you know, I like the idea of connecting. That's what has meant the most to me in recent years, and it has coincided with COVID and isolation. And so those two things kind of came together. And as much as I really hate technology, I really do, but I'm very aware of its evils, but I am glad that Zoom has existed over the last 3.5 years, so that I meet people who I can talk to, you know, like I'm talking to you two who I've never met before, in ways that I really can't talk to most of my friends in real life because they don't share it. So, and the other person I wanted to mention, whose name escapes me, Jamal, the journalist about ICE. You
Yeah,
know
you're
who
thinking about Dar Jamail?
Yes, yes. So I
And
read him and I saw him, and you know,
yeah.
I love him. I love his humility. I love his sincerity, and I love that he kind of says what he thinks and what he feels, but he doesn't try to tell us, well, in the year, you know, 2025, this will happen and this will happen. He just, yeah, he's I like him a lot.
Yeah.
So that's how I got here. So now what I do is, you know, I've done so much of this. I think I'm kind of ready to stop for a while, but I kind of like to check things out and see, oh, what is this person's view and like that. So that's why I'm here. I'm so glad I finally get to see you, Dean, because like I said, I tried for so long.
Yeah. I I am remembering that you did show up for at least one,
I
maybe a
did.
couple.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you bringing up, excuse me, Dar Jamail. He's an extraordinary human being in so
Yes.
many ways, in the ways that you just described, and for him to bring the quality and integrity of his journalistic work with his own personal sharing and the depth of that. You know, if somebody asked me what's the one book that they should read to know what's going on the planet and how to be a human being in the face of it, I would say that it's The End of Ice from Dar Jamail.
Definitely.
Well, thank you both for sharing a little bit about what got you here to this space. And I'm inclined to just share with you a little bit about what this evolution of my particular expression is out of hearing my calling, like you were just both describing what called you into action and into perhaps a different way of being and so on. The evolution of this work is about 8 years ago. I put together my first introductory course for the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities, and people who consider themselves HSPs, highly sensitive people, the people from a number of different directions, a number of different small pockets of the population, and all of them sharing a concern for what's going on. And my early iteration of the introductory work that I offered, the online courses and so on, it was just a mass of content, because I was doing that to write my book. I was reading everything and watching every video, and there was so much good stuff to help write the book. But it's not something that translates into course material from the way I did it. It was too much. And I lost the key elements that I so wanted to highlight and actually have people create a way to experience it for themselves, not just read it or watch it. And it was a lot like asking people to drink from a fire hose. And it was also quite heady. I really did, all we ended up doing was talking a bunch when we had the coursework side of it, whether it was live at that time, being able to do a live course. I remember when we actually got to be in the same room together. And then, of course, since then, the Zoom world. And what I've seen through the various evolutionary stages of the work is there needs to be the inclusion of different aspects of us. We have feeling bodies. We actually have feelings and emotions that's circulating all the time. Except our culture, one of the superpowers of our culture is that we learn to override those feelings. We learn to either suppress or ignore some large percentage of those feelings. And the people who do that the best, we tend to richly reward them. I'm talking about the folks who are in the corner offices in corporations, and the people who are at the highest ends of government. There's a certain amount of override that one must have to be able to get that job. So to bring it back to daily living, the way, what I've really discovered in my own practices, which really this whole work is based on, and then how it iterates into the coursework, is we got to remember that we're in bodies. Of course, starting with the physical body. That's the easy one. I'm just feeling my legs, giving my knees a squeeze right now to remind myself of the lower part of my body, which I haven't given any thought to since we got to talking. So, it's kind of easy, almost silly. It's almost silly to be able to talk, about, just being present to your body, squeezing your knees to make sure that they're still there and that sort of thing. What I soon learned when I did that research into who's offering valuable training way back in the day is that these are actually basic resilience skills. These are, I call them first aid level resilience skills. And so it has to do with breath, with actual physical contact, whether it's my squeezing my knees to remember and to be present in my body, to re-presence myself in the body. And who I learned these basic skills from was actually a group that is part of the disaster relief crew that would come in after a city is hit by a hurricane. And you got 50 families sleeping in a high school gym in order to survive because their homes are flooded out. And these skills are so simple that they can be trained to the 10-year-old daughter of the family over there in the corner. She can come over for a 10-minute class, learn the skills, and take them back to the other members of her family in the corner. And I noticed that I had no idea about these simple skills in my growing up, in my family, in my neighborhood, in my school. There was no opportunity, no reason for people to learn that kind of stuff. And what I'm seeing now, and I've been committed to ever since, is that this is the first step of this introductory work that I offer, is these embodied self-regulation, co-regulation skills. And I'm sorry to use that kind of clinical term. What that basically means is if I want to self-regulate, it usually means something has come along and knocked me off center. Something has happened. I can tell you a big incident that happened in the region where I live, which is called the Rogue Valley here in Southern Oregon. We had a firestorm here 3 years ago. And in less than one day, 10,000 people were burned out of their rentals or their homes they owned, and a number of businesses as well. Obviously, a massive impact on our relatively small area. And the kind of skills that people need when they drive up and they realize not only their home, but their entire block, their entire neighborhood had just been completely devastated. It was gone. Mm. And the kind of dysregulation that can happen, the kind of off-center that can happen, can literally be lethal in a person. The kind of shock that we can be in. And I'm certainly not hoping this for anyone. I don't think, it doesn't look like any of the three of us are in the middle of that kind of emergency or disaster setting. But it does seem that we are around the world experiencing more and more devastation or extreme weather or some aspect or another of an often traumatic aspect of human-caused collapse of Earth or human systems, including extreme weather. So the embodiment starts there in the work that I'm speaking with you about now. And this brand new iteration of our introductory course here, we used to call it Dancing at the Edge. Which I was fond of that name, but we have renamed it, and I'm happy to talk about why in just a little while. But it's called Collateral Beauty. And what that's about is similar to what I'm hoping that Steve will, in just a couple of minutes, tell us about the course that he's been a part of designing, offering out, and now having it blossom. That at the center of this work now, even though it's an introductory course, which is earlier than I would have presented it in earlier courses, is the notion of collapse acceptance. It's one thing to have collapse awareness. That is its own threshold. It can be kind of a rough threshold to cross for people. So I don't mean in any way to diminish the importance of that earlier threshold. But my sense of the time that we've got and the current circumstances, that for people to be able to expand their capacity to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors, which is really at the core of this work, then we really got to get on with it. And so we've really skipped some steps in this collateral beauty course. And we go right into suggesting that a person could set about curating their own practices, their own practices of embodied practices, of psychological, or being able to sit in circle with other people, to be able to participate in open and authentic conversation with one another, even with neighbors that they don't know, or even with people who might be from a different political persuasion. There are so many practices that are available that can help us connect with the people who are in our neighborhood or in our city. And that just has felt all along like the level that we're really headed toward. I don't know anybody yet who has access to making a difference at the scale of a nation or the globe. I'm certainly open to it. I'd like to meet people who have that kind of influence. That's great. But the vast majority of people, no, everybody that I know and everybody I've come in contact with on this path, this is the level that we need to be on in our own path together. The level of being more and more consciously aware of our body and the number of different aspects of our embodied reality. And that takes some learning. Also, to be able to reconnect with other people, it takes something to learn to sit in circle, to learn to do the kind of workshop experience that I know that Steve was pointing at. I believe we have some overlap in that kind of workshop. It's not something you can just stumble into. It really takes presence, and it takes a commitment to learn and be supportable in that kind of environment and offer support in that kind of environment. These are the kind of skills that we often will include at virtually every level of the coursework or in the support groups that we're talking about. So maybe this is a good time. Steve, would you mind telling us a little bit about the birth of and the growth of this course that you've been a part of creating?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for asking. So yeah, I was, I don't know, shortly before COVID locked things down, myself and a few friends, we felt the need to form a local resilience group. And that's what we called it. We just called ourselves Resilience. And 7 of us were on that group. We met every other Thursday for a number of years, right up until a few months ago, actually. And out of that, I was in a conversation with one of the members one day, my friend Mary, and we got talking about collapse awareness and resilience side of things, and also the acceptance side of things. And being in recovery for a number of decades myself, I latch onto that word acceptance in a lot of areas of life. And so by the end of that conversation, we had decided to create a course ourselves, and we called it Resilience and Acceptance in the Face of Collapse. And within a couple of weeks, one of the other members, Doug Della Pietra, joined us as well. And so the 3 of us worked good portion. We started, I think, in March of 22, and we launched the pilot course just about a year ago, September last year. Since then, there's been 10 course offerings. There's 2 more launching this month, one next month, and one in January. That's what's on the agenda right now. And we didn't know where this was going to go. It's definitely been a learning process for us. and a terrific learning process. I would say that out of it, probably the two biggest things that have come to light for not only the participants, but the course developers is 2 points in particular. One, and you've touched on both of them, Dean. One is being in present, being in the moment, and the other is the importance of community. And the course is a 9-week course. We give it's 2 to 3 hours of homework each week on a specific topic that session will be on, and the sessions are the introduction, um, tools for inner resiliency, the great unraveling, uh, tools for outer resilience, adaptation, indigenous wisdom, and the original instructions, a session on acceptance itself, and finally the 9th session is tying the strands together. And then we meet once a week during those 9 weeks for an hour and a half.
Mhm.
And that's, that's where we can delve into whatever was in the homework material, which is a mix of video clips and articles mostly, and some original pieces that we course developers wrote. And it's really interesting that usually within the second or third week, there's always somebody checking in at the beginning of the session saying, I could not wait to get back here. Because it's just what Ellen was talking about before, that there is not a lot of safe places out there for people to talk about collapse awareness, and especially collapse acceptance. And so out of that, Doug and I, the other course developer, the two of us have stayed with us. Mary has gone in another direction for right now, but we've come to the realization that it's time to expand the course for those who want to continue and have, not unlike what you're doing here, have an opportunity for those that want to participate in community gathering on Zoom. And it'll be specific topics around collapse acceptance. We've come up with some really, really good bullet points for people to drill down. There was a group of 2 that organically decided they wanted to continue, and they've been meeting for about 4 months now, and 2 that drove the bus on this, and there's about 20 in the group, and they are having a rich experience meeting every other week for an hour and a half to just continue the conversation, support each other, and enrich each other's journey, if you will.
Right on.
So that's a very brief description of the course.
Steve, if I could ask you 2 short questions here. I love that the titles, as you described, the 9 sessions, it sounds fascinating and comprehensive. Is first question, is this online or in person? And second, where do you get your people from? How do people hear about it?
So 9 of the 10 have been on Zoom, and we've had people from all over the world, New Zealand and Australia, and certainly Canada and the US, Chile. One of the course offerings that's being launched this month, we've got at least half a dozen from Europe that are joining, and one that took place in person. And there will be others that happen like that, but Zoom is really a terrific vehicle for what we put together. And as far as where they come from, as so far we have posted on the Deep Adaptation Facebook page a few times. Michael Dowd has put it on his website. He took the course and was impressed enough with it to put it on his website. Word of mouth is certainly a big piece, and I would say that's far and away the biggest piece. When we did our pilot course back in September of last year, we just put it out to the local local, in my case, is Rochester, New York, Pachamama group, and half of the course filled up with people from that group that wanted to jump in and participate. And since then, we've had folks from the Pachamama Alliance staff that have taken the course and been quite impressed with it. And there's about 45 people that have stepped up and taken the tutorial to learn to lead the course. At this point, probably about 15 of them have actually done it after these next 3 courses that are being launched. That will be well over 20 people that have had experience leading the course.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Interesting.
And if you're interested, or anybody else, you can ask to be put on the waiting list. The waiting list is about 100 long at the moment. You just send an email to collapse-acceptance@gmail.com.
What was the name of it?
Collapse-acceptance@gmail.com.
Okay.
All right. Well, I would like to similarly just do a little layout of this collateral beauty introductory course from the living resilience side of the house. And what we've got is a mostly at this point an online self-paced course that a person can then connect with others, and in one of our other support group offerings as they would like to. So that'll be really up to a person how much connection they want to step into. Like we have our Tuesday evening safe circle calls, 6 to 7:30 Pacific every Tuesday. And we're going to be offering up every Saturday in October and one in November to offer a Saturday get-together, a gathering to match up with each of the 5 sections of the Collateral Beauty course. So there'll be a layout of here's the material. It's quite easily spelled out in the when you sign up for the course in the Living Resilience community space. It's broken up into 5 sections and quite obvious. It'll be interesting to see what one of the more difficult pieces has been, because we in the earlier iterations had quite a bit of international time zone figuring to do, and to be able to do that at the same time and make it workable. At the very least, it seemed like we had to have 2 different times for any given session to happen to include everybody. So we're trying it this way. It'll be an exciting experiment. I literally have no idea if this is going to work out better for folks or not. And what I'm particularly excited about is, yes, I know I already mentioned that I'm reducing constantly in a weight reduction program for what I call the sober data of the topic. We all I think really have it down now how to do doom scrolling. It's a talent we all have, whether we really want to be doing that or not. Committed as I can be to, instead of that sober data, then what? The alternative has been to offer collateral beauty. So if what we're really looking at is a world that is not looking good, things are not looking great in either the human systems or the earth systems, and it can be very tempting to slide into anything along the lines of anxiety or depression or despair. We all know the litany of what's possible to slide into. And what we've really been balancing that with is as much beauty as we can muster, and beauty that as much as possible also engages, not just passive watching or reading a poem and so on, but to we have some sing-along songs. There are a few sources of recordings of just fantastic singing along. And I've got to tell you that I am not a singer, and you would probably not want me to do a whole lot of singing if we got to do a live course together. But the point is that there is so much joy, there is so much connection that is just built into singing together. I've heard it said, and I agree completely, that you just can't be grumpy when you're singing with people. It just doesn't fit in this. You can't put those two in there at the same time. And so I'm very excited to be including a lot of different kinds of music, including sing along, some extraordinary poetry, and there's been some just breathtaking video work done in these past 10 years of people who have those gifts to really express what it is that they are suggesting for our reconnection with Earth, our reconnection with each other, and
Can I
and
ask you a
our
question?
reconnection with the deeper self. Yeah, Ellen.
Sorry to interrupt you. I'm gonna have to leave soon, but I want you to just clarify for me, because when you were talking on your earlier talk right before Steve spoke, and you I think what I want to know is, in the support groups that you have, if this is available, because what I find in the last 3 years, and particularly, well, yeah, the last 3 years, I mean, people who never wanted to talk about climate change are now initiating the conversation with me in my real life situation. And don't think, I think somebody else said this, that they didn't feel they were very articulate, or did I imagine that? But I don't feel that I am very good at kind of bridging that. That's a long way from talking about climate change to talking about collapse. That's a long way. But anyway, it's the opening. It's the opening that I want to take advantage of. But
Yes.
I'm wondering, in your support groups, are there ways for me to learn how to be, I don't know, just to do it better, because I don't do it well.
Yeah. Yes. and I'm not quite sure what you're saying about the difference between your stance or what is kind of on your screen at the moment about climate change in particular, as opposed to folks who talk more easily about collapse. One thing I want to make really clear is, and my experience, Steve, of the course that you've designed and that I participated in neither of these courses, in neither of these circles or these groups where people are coming together to share, have I heard anyone being corrected about, well, no, we're talking about collapse here. We can't talk about, it's not enough to talk about climate change. I don't experience any sort of judgment or rejection of anybody's particular stance or their orientation toward what matters most to them in that particular time. But so I hope that it gives you some relief to be able to know that you'll be welcome in either of the things we're talking about today, for sure.
Yeah,
and
no.
to be more specific with what I think was the center of your question, is there a way to learn to be more articulate? Is there a way to not only be able to articulate, say the things you want to be saying in a clear way, in an impactful way, but also to be able to be on the other side of that and to listen well, be able to encourage deeper conversation. Yes, is my short answer to that. And the one piece that I would tell you in a series of different levels of intimacy, levels of detail, and levels of group conversation, there are different ways to facilitate and different ways to hold space, different ways to listen. And I could tell you that the very first, and I think the most valuable conversation tool that I have ever learned is one of the simplest and one of the oldest. Way back in the day, it was called reflective listening.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and these days it's often called empathy circle listening. And you might want to look that up on YouTube. There are many how-to videos about that, and it's super simple to learn. And to me, that is exactly the kind of practice that I hear you asking for, which is to be able to become more and more able to articulate and to share as fully as you wish. And then often an even more active job in that conversation is to listen, because the listener would listen for a moment, for a minute or two. Then the speaker would pause and the listener would reflect back what the person's been saying. So that reflection is something that seems to almost immediately reduce the temperature, the aggravation level that can be present when you've got people from different political points of view these days. Not, there's just a lot of polarization for a number of different reasons. And so this seems to be one of the easiest tools to bring with us into.
Good idea.
Yeah. So yes,
Yeah,
that's present. Hey, Steve.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to leave now, but
Okay.
I thank you both. Very interesting. And Steve, I wrote down your Collapse Acceptance Gmail, and Dean, I'll send you an email and see if you can help me get on so I can look at your offerings.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Ellen, it's been so great to have you here.
Thank you. Bye.
See ya.
Hi, Alan. Yeah, I was just going to drop Catherine Hayhoe's name for her too, because she's got some pretty simple, straightforward videos out there, or approaches how to talk to people about climate change and so on. But next time maybe.
I'm writing it down, and it'll be on the recording here. And I'll be sure that this is a couple of more links I can include in the many links on the show notes of this recording.
Nice.
Yeah, really good to spend time with you. I'm so glad you came. I'm glad you had a funky day out there where you were, so you could be on the screen. And it's an exciting time. It just seems like there is so much good stuff blossoming. Yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time.
I agree. Yeah. And what Ellen said about Joanna Macy's comment, but I mean, I've seen that video a number of times where she just has this ecstatic look on her face, like, I am so grateful to be alive in this time. I would not have wanted to miss this for anything.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it really, the first time I heard that, I'm like, really? And kind of sunk in, and I'm like, yeah, she's got a good point. And each time I watch it again, I'm like, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to miss this time. It's challenging and got its pitfalls and downside, and oh my gosh, is it exciting, as you said,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, the
challenging.
what since it's just you and me at this point, we can pretty much select our, last few minutes together and what topics. I'd like to just bring up a quick topic to give you a sense of, what I've had a chance to share about today is more or less the introductory level course, this collateral beauty course. And you know uh, what we also have is a kind of a progression of more and more experiential and really practice-based support group stuff. So it's not just conversation; it's actually taking on practices to build out these skills. And I've just been asked to consult a bit with a professor at a university that's putting together a course a lot like this for the business school at this university. And I consider that to be also an extraordinary level of this blossoming of new possibilities, this blossoming of people who are doing their best to move this conversation forward in some way, this impossible conversation, how to move it forward. And I also find, I'd be curious how you hold that paradox of collapse acceptance and still being engaged, like as if we have a calling in ourselves, in our whatever we want to call it, our soul, our purpose, and so on, how to be fully alive and connected with that with no regard to outcome, which I know is also a strong part of Joanna Macy's orientation. That kind of ecstatic look on her face, it can only happen when a person has let go of the outcome at this point. I'm curious how you have come to hold that paradox in your own system of staying engaged with life fully and being in collapse acceptance.
Well, first of all, I don't think I succeed at it 100% of the time.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it's pretty common, for most of us. I think it's not 100% of the time. So I'll say that up front. But there's two pieces from the course that you may remember, the pieces that I put in there because they impacted me so strongly.
Hmm.
One is the original instructions, and I've been blessed to have some indigenous elders in my life with some fantastic teachings, um, and I fully accept the reality that we're each given a specific particular reason why we came, to live this life. And sometimes it's a lifelong journey figuring out what that is or discovering what it is. And other times we might have already lived it. I might have already lived it and not have had that awareness. So that even if that's true, it still sparks something in me to keep seeking and looking and
Yeah.
having a willingness to be generous of spirit and time and energy, and to do what's mine to do, and be curious enough to look around. The other piece that's had a big impact on me is that Angeles Arian's piece about uh, the theme of detachment. And in that book, The Fourfold Way, that's where I got that piece. Um, uh, Somewhere is in that book, it talks about the shadow of the West. And this is bringing in a little bit of MKP stuff here now, but shadow of the West is attachment to outcome. And so it just when I first read that, it landed so hard on me, hard in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, this is one of life's great truths, at least for Steve Amen. And the more I can live in that place of not being attached to outcome, and I don't succeed all the time for sure,
Sure.
but the more I can, and when I lose consciousness of that, bring myself back to consciousness, then I don't need to know the outcome. It doesn't matter. It becomes less and less important as time goes on. I think this question ties in great with so much of what we hear, that have had our finger in this pot for a while, that does acceptance mean giving up? And then what does that mean? Then it mean just go out and party hardy or what?
Right.
And of course it doesn't. We know that.
Mhm.
We say it a number of times in the course, and it still surprises me that a few people at the end of the course will sort of feel like that's what we're saying, and I'm like, no,
Yeah.
we're not at all. Quite the opposite. And it's a great question, and for us to keep our swords sharp, so to speak,
Yes.
so we can cut cleanly when that question arises and say, no, we're not talking about giving up. We're
Yeah.
just talking giving up on expectations and attachment. And you still have work to do. I still have work to do.
Yeah.
And it might be as simple as taking my granddaughter out for ice cream,
Mhm.
or taking the dog to the nursing home for a visit on Tuesday afternoons.
Right.
Or it might be something I never dreamed of, like being a co-developer on this course that's spreading like crazy. And it's like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm wondering, I'm inclined to just expand what you're saying, because I'm right with you in everything you've just said. It's all too common that there's this kind of confused look that doesn't seem to move easily for some people, because all they can hear with acceptance is to give up, is to just roll over and play dead or do whatever their version of just checking out. And I noticed that there's also an aspect of our culture, and it's actually within the collapse-aware community, or more importantly, the environmentally concerned or the climate change community, activists and so on, that when a person goes to acceptance there, or they become a doomer voice, they're given that kind of, that's plastered across their picture from now on social media and so on. To be a doomer, or to be someone who has come to acceptance, especially at the level of collapse, is an extraordinarily difficult thing for even ridiculously intelligent, well-educated people who are in this conversation. There, there's been some really derogatory things said about the doomer community and certain particular, louder voices and so on. And to me, it fits very much in the same place that you're talking about, that there's a very strong message from the heart of virtually every doomer person that I know, and myself included, and now hearing you describe yourself, that there is work to do. There is calling from inside of my center that is calling me into participating with life, and participating as sincerely and as deeply as I ever have. And I'm holding this reality that collapse is occurring now, and it is promising to just keep expanding out. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to say I have a bit of heartache about that, heartbreak about that, to see that kind of name calling and yeah, just treating people in a rough way who are just half an inch away from us on the spectrum of of caring about this earth and caring about what's going on and wanting to be vibrantly connected with and active in life. Sometimes we can be pretty hard on one another.
Have you ever heard a speech? It's in printed form. I don't think it's recorded anywhere. It's called "The Penalty of Leadership."
No.
And I don't know the author. I'm going to look it up and send it to you because what I hear you saying reminds me of that. And I can't quote any portion of it. I just know the general feeling, but it's basically in one case, at one point, it talks about Fulton inventing the steamship and
Mhm.
people standing on the side of the river laughing, saying that's never going to go anywhere, this type of thing.
Right.
And people who have been, multiple people down through the years, leaders in their field that are ridiculed and uh, lambasted one way or another. So
Yeah.
I hear how that's a heartbreak for you, and I get that. And it's the penalty of leadership.
Yeah.
It's a piece of it. And
Yeah.
thank God we've got people that are willing to stand in the fire, right?
True.
It wasn't people like you and Michael and Jem and 1,000 others that I've had the pleasure to cross paths with, on the screen or in person or whatever. I would be silent about what's going on inside of me. I'm
Yeah.
sure I would. I wouldn't. I'm not that outgoing
Yeah.
to be the klaxon. But one other point I want to make about the the willingness to continue to do something
Mhm.
in the face of collapse. And this was a piece I got from that seminar I mentioned where I was staffing the personal growth seminar. It was the first piece of work I did back in '93. And the piece was, if you believe the piece that comes from the Bible that says it's more blessed to give than to receive,
Mhm.
then the greatest gift that you can give to somebody is allow them to give to you.
Mm.
And I think it kind of circles back to, okay, what is it I can do? And I don't have to wait for somebody to ask. I can just look around, and if I believe that little saying, then I know there's going to be joy that comes from it. I know there's going to be fulfillment that comes from it. And anybody that's ever stepped up and done something for somebody else knows that.
Mhm.
They might forget it, but it's there. It's always there. That same seminar when I went through the advanced level, one of the things we leave with at the end of the week is a life purpose statement. And
Yes.
I my first life purpose statement, and it's changed multiple times since then, was to make a significant difference. And I had no clue what that meant really, other than I wanted to do something that was greater than Steve Amon.
Yes.
And so anyways,
Yeah. Stephen, I'm just thrilled that you made the choice of coming on today to our little first Saturday gathering. It's just delightful to have you here, and I've learned a lot and felt a lot, and you've given me food for thought. I look forward to, if you don't mind, I do have the email address that you gave folks to contact you to be on the waiting list for the course and so on. So I'll be including that. And if you do happen to bump into the penalty of leadership speech, I will also do some looking. But please do send it because
I
it
have it saved in yeah,
sounds
I have it
like it'd
saved
be
in a
good.
file somewhere.
And I just look forward to our next time to be able to spend some time together.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean. Me too. It's
All
good
right.
seeing you again today.
Thank you, brother.
And just a reminder, sometime when you got a few minutes, look for a piece you're going to share with me on holding space. Remember the other day
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Good.
well, there's no hurry, there's no urgency, but you didn't bring it up, so I thought maybe it slipped your mind, and I just want to remind you of it whenever you get to it. Because it's interesting, because I had an opportunity yesterday to hold space for somebody for about an hour.
Yeah,
And I've got a pretty good handle on it, but I would like to learn more.
right on. Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
This is the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on song. This is the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on song. This is the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on song. I am Abigail, and this is Sean, and we're so glad that you've turned this on and welcomed us into your home, and you are welcome into our home. We're in Dayton, Ohio. We're in Sean's parents' house.
My parents' house.
Sean's parents' house. We were in Louisville when the shit hit, and we packed our 3-year-old into a car. We drove kind of far. We drove here, and we've been so lucky and blessed to be safely here. And we thought we'd be here for like 10 days, tops.
What did we know?
What did we know?
What
What did we know? We thought we knew a lot. We thought we knew a lot. Woo! Keep going on song. This is a keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. This is a keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. And we've been mostly healthy. We've been okay. Are you okay? Are you alright? Are you okay? Are you alright? Are you okay? I hope your body is whole tonight. And if your heart is breaking, I hope it's breaking open. And if your breath is shaking, I hope it's shaking through. And I hope that you've watched a lot of really great television, like a lot of it. And I hope that you find a hand lotion that actually makes your skin feel better. And I hope that you have enough to eat. I hope you're getting enough sleep, and I hope you have enough good company or enough good memory to last you a long time. Keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. We sing the keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. Let's bring some joy into the room, why not? We could try it, or some rage,
Keep going, keep going.
and some grief and relief. Ooh, oh, I hope my rage, I pray my rage is a fire that cleans my mind out and makes me ready to listen. I pray my pain is a river that flows to the ocean that connects my pain to yours. And I pray my happiness is like pollen that flies to you and pollinates your joy. Oh boy, is that possible? I don't know, we are making this up as we go. We have to make it up as we go. The keep going song, the keep going song. Oh, we're making it up as we go. Keep going, keep going, keep going on. Keep going on song. And I pray that when we meet again, that the world has changed into the world that we are imagining now together. And I pray that the world has become the world that we're planting inside of ourselves for each other and for our ancestors and for our kids. Ooh, and we're gonna start. This is a rough beginning. That's all I've got is a rough beginning to offer you. We're gonna start by singing some songs in this tiny space together. We're we're just gonna sing some songs for you, and we hope that when you hear them, you will feel a little bit less alone, and we will feel a little bit less alone in the work and in the hurt, and we will be together tonight somehow, whenever this is, wherever this is. We will be together tonight for the keep going on, keep going on song. This is a keep going on, keep going on song. This is a keep going on, keep going on song. This is a keep going on, keep going on song. This is a keep going on.